Good afternoon, everyone. Real quick before I go ahead and get started, I'm gonna do a quick mic check. I need a few of you. If you can hear me, go ahead and indicate so in the conversation box for me, please. All right, and real quick, I need to find Suzanne in the attendee list and get her over to the presenter side real quick, and she'll be sharing some information with us as well. All right. Say good afternoon, everyone. You've joined us for the Bidders webinar for the 2020 College Readiness and Success Models grant competition. So first off, thank each and every one of you for submitting an intent to apply, hence why you're here to the mandatory bidders webinar. And throughout the course of the webinar, we'll share a lot of information in a little bit of time, and we'll kind of move quite fast through it and give you the opportunity to pose a few questions at the end. In advance, we do understand everything that's going on in higher education, and both Suzanne and my purview as it relates to the TSI, the TSIA. But in advance, I just want to ask everyone heed to questions asked during the context of this webinar, that they be related to the actual grant competition. Um, at a future date in the very near future, we're trying to make it happen by the end of this week. We will host a statewide webinar where we'll address all of the concerns and questions that we've received regarding specifically the TSIA in multiple contexts, whether it's IHE, dual credit, and things like that. And we'll do the best that we can to provide you with the guidance that we've received from our leadership at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, in conjunction with working with the other agencies that are also stakeholders with the TSIA results and such. So jumping right in, which would have got to the coronavirus update for higher education. If you go to the THECB's website, at the very top, we have a link, and it's a frequently asked question document that's updated regularly, in which we're doing the best that we can to provide timely information to institutions as decisions are made within the agency regarding operation, and things like that. So if you have any questions regarding the impact to institutions and you want the coordinating board's response, that's the most information that we have as of now. So it's also listed on our TSI and DE webpage. So you'll find that information in that link there. Jumping right in again, the timeline for the CRSM 2020 grant competition. We're here at the bidders webinar. So the inquiry deadline is the next approaching deadline, and it's April 1st. And the inquiry deadline is where you submit all of your questions regarding the grant competition beyond this conversation. Again, the application deadline is April 13th, 2020. And a date that we don't have in here, but I'll talk about a little later, is by the end of next week, I believe it's March 30th, you will receive your institutional profile for the developmental education program survey. And if you're unsure of what that is, I'll explain it a little bit more detail a little later in the webinar. And if you have any questions, I'll do the best that I can to monitor what I'm trying to share with you, as well as the conversation box. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them there. And then at the end, I'll, if time permits, I'll open it up, and then we'll have a formal conversation, and you can actually chime into the conversation. So in advance, I'm not going through the entire request for applications. These are select pieces that oftentimes need clarification. So I've taken out some highlights. However, if you have areas that you would like for me to give further clarification on, please feel free to drop that in the conversation box, and I'll do so at the end of the webinar. Inquiries. This is a very important piece. So inquiries, as I shared, the deadline is April 1st. And you'll notice in here that it says March 11th. However, there's an addendum to the RFA that's also published on the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board websites under institutional grant opportunities, and it has all of the date corrections. A number of the inquiries that we received were related to the dates that were in there, and we apologize for those dates. Dates are in so many places in this RFA or in our RFAs, and unfortunately we didn't catch all of them. However, the established dates are set forth in the RFA and the timeline, and the correct dates are in the timeline that's at the beginning of this webinar at the PowerPoint presentation, and you will receive this shortly after the webinar. And you can find any date changes in the RFA in the addendum that's on the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board's website. But specifically regarding inquiries, all inquiries should be directed to the point of contact. Applicants and prospective applicants must not discuss an application, including the notice of intent to apply or this RFA, with any other THECB employee. I highlight that because both Suzanne and I have relationships with a number of you who are under the sound of my voice and in the field of developmental education. However, when it comes to protocol as it relates to carrying out the grant competition, we do so with high integrity. So we want to make sure that you are aware and follow the policies and procedures. So if you've perhaps tried to have an offline conversation via phone call, text message regarding the RFA, you may have received in some cases, no response, or a response that just generally reflected you back to the section 1.5 of the RFA and directing you to submit all of your inquiries regarding the RFA to cri@thecb.state.tx.us. The point of contacts, and this is another important part. I've received a number of emails regarding the RFA, and my form response is all email correspondence must be received pre-award to cri@thecb.state.tx.us. So make sure that if you have a team that you're working with, that they're aware of the communication protocol regarding the RFA, just to make sure that your institution is not inherently disqualified for potentially applying as a result of not following the stated communication protocol as set forth in the application. And here's where we'll jump into some of the select sections of the RFA. So first off, the maximum number of awards will be roughly 10, and it's all depending funding. So you have there, and hopefully everybody's had a chance to go through the RFA in depth. And you'll see that the initial funding will be negotiated with the THECB staff, and it'll be anything from $50,000 to $75,000, again, based on experience and proposed budget. And then supplemental funding, what we're calling supplemental funding, is after essentially year one, or the halfway mark, not year one, my apologies, after the halfway mark through the implementation of your project, we'll assess its progress. And if you're making sufficient progress on the deliverables, and that's outlined in the RFA, and I'll talk about those shortly, that the additional funds will be dispersed to you to continue your operation at that time. However, note that although we negotiate the final amount of the contract with you and everything, that once we reach that halfway mark and we come in on that assessment of how you're meeting your deliverables, that supplemental funding is not guaranteed. It's all determined upon whether or not you're doing what you're supposed to do in terms of implementing and executing your project. And there's a question that just popped in. Should our proposed budget represent the $50K to $75K range? No, your proposed budget should represent what your total budget is. However, when we have those final negotiations about the budget and the final awards are made, the THECB will make that final determination of what the initial funding will be. And note, many of you, if you're familiar with the former college readiness and success models grants that we've done in the past, we've primarily focused on completions-based funding, meaning we'll provide you with initial funds, and all of the additional funding that you received after that is based upon completions, students completing their first college level courses. This particular grant competition is not a completions-based funding model. Literally, we'll negotiate the initial funds, and once the initial funds have been negotiated, we'll give an assessment midway through, and that'll determine the additional funding that you'll get. And as you can see, my partner in crime, Suzanne, she's chiming in on via text to the questions that are coming in. So definitely feel free to fire away if you have questions via the comment box. And this is actually where I really want Suzanne, where I really want you to hear her voice. Suzanne, can you give me a call on my cell and I can patch you in if you can hear me? But I would like for her to really explain the scope of work so it's very, very clear. And if she can't, I'll give due diligence, but I really want Suzanne to chime in and explain this for you as well. All right, so I gave that pause, but if she chimes in, if she gives me a call, I'll patch her in so you can hear her. Otherwise, I'll just go ahead and give you. Oh, okay. Suzanne's not available via phone right now. Everybody's strapped with devices. And let me see if I can do one thing real quick to get Suzanne on here. Suzanne, if you could go ahead and unmute yourself, you can speak to the next few slides.
Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, yay. Okay, awesome, great. This is so funny. I love somebody responded, welcome to the club. Keelan has 3 kids, so he's really strapped for devices. So anyway, yes, the scope of work. So one of the most common questions is, does an applicant need to address all three components that are outlined in section 3.2? And the answer is yes. So what I want to do now is kind of go over each of the three components and just to make sure that everybody understands what we are indeed looking for. So the first component is that the awarded applicant will agree to put 100% of its eligible underprepared students in a co-requisite model. And, depending, of course, what the need is for the student, it could be in an area of math or ELAR. We could probably negotiate if the student needs both and it doesn't fit into the student's schedules. We certainly can be, flexible on that point. And now, again, what we talk about with eligibility, we're talking about levels 5 and 6 students. And I just want to remind everyone that we are very diligently working on implementing TSIA 2.0 and continuing that development. It looks like the launch date might be put off approximately a month. So it was August 30th, and I think that may jump to September 28th, I believe is the date we're looking at now. But other than that, we're mostly on track to get that going. So because we're talking about this 100% enrollment in co-requisite models, we are talking about by spring 2021. So obviously in spring 2021, if all things go as planned, the TSIA, the current version, will no longer be available and the 2.0 will be available. And one main difference with the 2.0 is that the diagnostic will be reduced from 2 to 1 diagnostic, and that 1 diagnostic will provide a level 1 to 6 for every student who does not meet the college readiness benchmark. So, right now you have some students that don't have a level because they were sent to the developmental diagnostic, and some students who do. So all of that is going to be much more simplified because every student who doesn't meet the benchmark, i.e. every student who is eligible for, potentially eligible for a co-requisite model, you will have a level 1 to 6 score for them. And then, of course, when we talk about eligibility for requirement number 1, that is only those students at levels 5 and 6. You certainly can choose to include students at levels 3 and 4 in some cases. And of course, you would know what those special cases are. If the student only needs 1 math class, for example, and they score at level 4 and it is maybe a contemporary math course, that student might actually be a good candidate for a co-requisite model. So whether you include levels 3 and 4 is completely up to you. We don't expect it, but you certainly could if you want to. But what we do expect is the level 5 and 6 to be included. Keelan, if you want to move to the next slide. Okay, the second thing is the multiple measures model. And basically, I think there was a little bit of a confusion. We often use the term multiple measures interchangeably with the term holistic advising. And in many cases, they do mean the same thing. But for this RFA, we are specifically talking about the use of a multiple measures model to determine the student to be college ready, not for placement in developmental education. So that's the key difference, because holistic advising or multiple measures as it is currently used is only employed after the student has been determined not to be college ready. And then we, of course, allow an institution to use multiple measures or holistic advising to see whether they may only need 1 hour of tutoring a week or something on the other end of the spectrum, maybe a full-fledged ALP type of developmental intervention or anything in between. So that's how currently multiple measures or holistic advising is employed. This is different. This is to help the student, this is another way to determine that the student is college ready. So basically, the first thing that we ask you to do is you're going to use the typical TSIA protocol. So for example, the students coming in, they're non-exempt, they haven't yet demonstrated college readiness. You would then give them the TSIA as the first line. If they don't meet the college readiness benchmark, then your multiple measures model would kick in. Obviously, if they do meet the benchmark, then they're college ready and they wouldn't be part of this model. So Keelan, if you want to go to the next slide, again, these are for students who did not meet the benchmark. So now the second component kicks in terms of multiple measures, and you can determine what the second component is. So we gave some examples in the RFA. Maybe your institution wants to work with a 2.5, so they have to have a high school GPA of at least 2.5. It could be 2.8, it can be 2.7, or it can be 3.0. And if you want to, and if you have justification through research, you can even go beyond that scope. We just gave these two as an example. And of course, you know, often we say, well, at what point does that cut off? We want it to be at least to the end of the junior year. So this is going to be the same protocol when institutions are determining top 10% and so forth. Okay, so you're looking at least through the end of the junior year, you're looking at either a high school transcript, and we understand for universities that's going to be pretty common. It's already built into your systems that you will have the student's high school transcript. However, we also understand for community colleges, many community colleges don't have the capacity, or they don't have a protocol at this point to accept a high school transcript for every entering student. And so we also want to have an institutional decision. Would you also be able to use self-reported GPA? That is your decision. If you want to allow self-reported GPAs, especially for those community colleges that maybe don't have a regular protocol or a capacity or a way to bring in the student's official high school transcript, then certainly that is another option for you to choose. So again, it could be verified through a transcript, or it could be self-reported. Now, one other mechanism in terms of self-reporting is the use of Apply Texas. If your institution uses Apply Texas, and I understand just about every institution does, there is a part in that application where the student will fill out their anticipated or current enrollment in high school courses as a junior or senior, depending on when they fill it out. Of course, what we're looking for, of course, is for the junior year. So if for the senior year. So if they have reported that they currently have already completed or are currently enrolled in and anticipating to complete 4 years of math and 4 years of English, that could be another component of your multiple measures model. Again, whether you use high school GPA, course taking patterns, or a combination of both, that is your institution's decision on how you want to approach your proposed multiple measures model. Now, another common question is, in the 4 years of math, should you require Algebra 2 to be one of those 4 years of math? Again, this is your decision as an institution. You can include that one of those math courses has to be an Algebra 2, or you can just say it could be 4 years of any math. Again, this is up to you on how you want to make that determination, and that will be, of course, outlined as part of your proposed multiple measures model. Keelan, you know, go to the next slide. One other thing that might be an option, and this is not outlined in your RFA, but we also will allow flexibility in this, and that is to partner with one or more of your local school districts to share data. I'm not sure if you are aware, but currently TEA does not collect grades. They only collect data from the school districts, whether a student passed or successfully completed a course or did not. They do not collect the actual grade. So because they don't do that, then TEA has, no way of, collecting GPA. So all of that is done through the local school districts. So another option might be to partner with your local school districts to share data and perhaps suggest 5 specific courses that if the student made an AB or an A, B, or C, again, up to your institution as part of your multiple measures model, which one you prefer, in these specific 5 courses, then that is also another demonstration of college readiness that your institution would like to study as a proposed model. Now, in the second bullet, we do want an English and an Algebra 2 to be part of that. And then it could be a biology, chemistry, or physics. And then we also would like a Texas government and history. So we're talking about courses that are generally part of also the student's high school graduation requirements. So we want it to be part of that. Of course, Algebra 2 is not specifically part of the general requirement. It might be part of an endorsement requirement, but for the purpose of multiple measures, we would like for those courses to be considered. And it says must include, however, again, if you want to propose some other courses that fit into these subject areas, we certainly would be open to that. So, if you think that there may be another course that is maybe a better example in your experience, or also noted through research or another study, that might be a better example of a potential college readiness indicator, then certainly feel free to include that in your multiple measures model. Because again, just like we said with the budget, with the awarded applicants, we will also be negotiating what that actual model will look like. And we're not only going to be negotiating that with you, but we're also prepared to help provide additional support. It could be something like MDRC or Community College Research Center, Columbia. It could be another research entity that we may also be able to bring in to help the awarded applicants really build a really good model to help ensure that we're going to be collecting the data so that it is really useful to help inform potential future policy with multiple measures for the entire state once this grant period ends and once we review all the findings. So just know that you're not going to be totally on your own in implementation and design, that we will work with other entities and help bring in other expertise to help you, and so that we can make sure that each awarded applicant has a really solid multiple measures model that you feel confident to move forward with, and that we really feel overall confident can help inform potential future statewide policy. Next slide. Okay, and as I mentioned, what we do expect the applicant is to clearly outline their model, including all the components of implementation, planning and implementation. How do you propose to recruit and identify the population, tracking strategies, and of course a number of other components that are going to be important. And of course we will be working with you to make sure, like I said, that a robust, very good study will result in what you're going to be ending up with the implementation. Okay, next slide. So the third component, okay, and that is whatever model you are using right now, or models that you are using right now as the co-requisite developmental ed support component, we just want you to beef that up somehow. We want you to scale that up somehow. We understand the other two components the scaling to 100% co-recs, the multiple measures model will take a majority of your efforts and your energy. So yeah, and we fully understand that. We don't want this third component here to be an additional burden. But a quick example, if you use supplemental instruction, maybe your proposal will be that you will bring in 5 new supplemental instructors. You will recruit and train 5 new supplemental instructors. Or in terms of your technology supported learning, you propose to use your grant funds to purchase X number of laptops to help support and integrate technology supported learning and build that up as part of your current offerings. So again, for the third component, really what we're looking for is a way that you are going to enhance and scale the developmental support component of what you are currently offering. And of course, as you can see there in the bullets, basically in detail how the scaling and enhancement also will continue to be supported after the end of the grant period. So that's the sustainability component. I think Keelan will talk a little bit more about that coming up in a couple of minutes, but that's also very key and important to be able to consider as you propose this third component of the scope of work. Next slide. Okay, and Keelan, I don't know if you want to go ahead and take over again. I think you already mentioned this, but if you want to take back over, I'll go ahead and mute my mic.
All right. Thank you, Suzanne. The Developmental Education Program Survey, I have this slide in here because I noticed that when everyone was introducing themselves, we have a variety of professionals from institutions represented. But the Developmental Education Survey, it's a required survey, and we really refer to it more as an inventory of the developmental education program at each institution that's completed annually. Again, this is a required survey, and we always have 100% response. But as part of the application process, by March 30th, we will email the contacts for submitted the listed in the intent to apply a copy of their institutional profile, and it'll be based on the results submitted by the institution on the 2019 DEPS survey. And the goal of this is the proposed project director and staff that will be overseeing the grant. Familiarize yourself with your DE program, and if there are any changes or updates to the DEPS, go ahead and make those corrections and submit the revised DEPS copy as part of your application. And if indeed you don't have any corrections, you'll just submit the copy of your DEPS with your application. The grant period. So I think it was referenced a little earlier, but once we get through the competition, we're looking hopefully to make our awards late April, early May. And the grant year thus far for this competition will run through August 31st, 2021. And that's unless other agreed upon with the THECB and the awarded grantees. Here's the information that I really wanted to get to you. So in section 8.2, it outlines the project narrative for the grant application. And in there are a number of required components, but I just wanted to highlight and give you some feedback on what we're looking for, or what pieces would be part of a strong application. Suzanne alluded to some when she was speaking about the scope of work, but specifically a strong application will include evidence of the current and anticipated impact of the co-requisite models at the applicant's institution, inclusive of outcomes data as evidence of impact. That is a mouthful, but no we take heed to what's going on in the state of higher education or in the nation right now with the pandemic. So we ask that you do the best that you can in terms of sharing data related to how co-requisites are currently working on at your institution, and then the outcomes that you're having with your current co-requisites. Again, a strong application will have detail to support the need for the proposed project. Suzanne outlined all of the components of the scope of work. So really sit back with your team and think about maybe some of your challenges, some of your priorities in moving the needles of student success on your campus and how co-requisites play a part in that, and provide us with information related to that. And it can include things such as outcomes related to students' college readiness. Maybe you have a high number of underprepared students entering your doors. First college level course completions. You may be seeing great outcomes with your co-requisite models, and you need this additional funding to scale those efforts to 100%. And then clearly outline a plan of action, how funds will be expended to reach the desired outcomes. And this is twofold. It'll come here, and you can also address it a little bit in your budget, which I didn't actually include in the webinar to talk about. But in your plan of action, we'd really like to see things related to what are the institutional commitments? What is the institution doing to ensure that this project is going to be successful? What's the play-by-play in terms of how your specific key offices are going to work together to conceptualize and implement your multiple measures model? How are you going to track the data that's required to be collected through the multiple measures model? So a comprehensive plan of action in terms of giving us a in 7 pages, I don't want to use the word detailed, but a strong framework for what it is that you propose for your project. And an evaluation plan that promotes an efficient and effective project. So Suzanne touched on it a little earlier when she was sharing about the scope of work, that you'll have the opportunity, you have the discretion to determine which populations you'll apply this to. So once you identify who you're going to apply your multiple measures method to, how you're going to scale your non-course based options, supplemental instruction, tutoring as such, how are you going to evaluate that? How are you going to, again, collect your data? So what's going to show that your project is effective? And I'll talk about it a little later, but in Appendix F, I believe, the project evaluation plan, that information will be included in there. Our colleague, Dr. Melissa Humphreys, our developmental ed data guru at the coordinating board, assisted us with coming up with the following data collection piece for this particular grant competition. And she's unable to be with us today, but as we finalize the grantees, she'll be an integral part in working with us to set up and finalize the data collection plans with the awarded grantees. But the data collection for multiple measures, and you'll see the items there. I'm not going to read through all of them, but what I do want to highlight about this is I shared earlier when I started the webinar that we're not doing this particular competition on completions-based model, meaning we're going to upfront you the initial funds and then allow you to execute. And we're really interested in the data. So a lot of the strength of your project is going to come in your ability to collect accurate data. And when we say accurate, I'm not saying counter to what Suzanne said in terms of whether it's a self-reported GPA or you have a high school transcript, but that you have a systematic way and it's outlined that you can gather this information, and as a result of your process, it can be deemed reliable, because we'll be seeking to analyze this data, again, as Suzanne said, to inform the future of state policy potentially. And Suzanne, if I miss anything at any point, feel free to chime back in. And again, with the data tracking and sharing, it will require the coordinations of your institution's reporting office and registrar. If you've worked with us on any of our college readiness and models, college readiness and success models grants in the past, you know that that partnership has to exist in terms of making sure that you can collect the data that you need to meet the reporting criteria for the grant. And then last but not least, whereas particularly with the former CRSM competitions, it's mainly you're not sending me student level detail. This is very student level detail, inclusive of social security numbers. So for this particular competition, that relationship you have with your institutional reporting office and your registrar will be even more paramount, because the data will have to be transferred via the Move It program with the coordinating board, which all PII or personally identifiable information has to be shared. So in an encrypted and secure format. So definitely, as you consider your response to the RFA, I strongly encourage you to give great credence to your data collection efforts. And here's the appendix that I referenced a little earlier. Appendix F is the program evaluation plan. So as you think about what it is that you want to do, we've outlined the scope of work. But now that you take this back to your institutions and you think about how do you want this to manifest in terms of moving the needle of student outcomes on your respective campuses, this is where you're going to outline those things. You're going to outline the goals, the activities and strategies that you're going to do to reach the goal. And then you're going to project the outcomes. You're going to give the impact measures, and you'll list the stakeholders involved. And then you'll also list the methods for collecting data. Minimally, you'll have one of these for each of your areas. And again, thinking about how you want to use the funding that you want to receive, particularly with that in the scope of work, it's measure number 3, item number 3, and that's the scaling of non-course based options. This is a good place to outline exactly what your vision is for that for your institution. And in the RFA, I believe there's a little bit more narrative to it, and I strongly encourage you to read up on that. But at face value, this is the area where you're going to outline how you're going to assess your project in terms of X number of students will be impacted or will be potentially impacted by our multiple measures model. And it's again, identifying those expected outcomes, the impact measures, the stakeholders involved, that this is going to be multifaceted. There will probably be few where there's just one office involved. So just a heads up on that this definitely will be a collaborative effort among many offices at your institution. And as part of, it's not highlighted in this webinar, but it's in the RFA, that once we select the finalists, we will be hosting another webinar specifically with those finalists for you to make your final pitch, and we'll be able to ask and address any questions that we have specifically about your proposal. So clearly defined goals and objectives will definitely assist you in your application process. And before I open it up for questions, again, I want to reiterate that although you're hearing from myself and Suzanne, that the proper protocol for communication regarding the RFA is in writing via email to cri@thecb.state.tx.us. After or if you are successful and you are an awarded grantee, you will be fully engaged with me as the program manager. But again, note that no contact shall be made with other THECB personnel regarding the RFA, and failure to comply with the requirement may result in the disqualification of an application. So I highlight those things just to make sure that everyone's on the same page and we're all in the loop. So I've unmuted the audience and I want to see how this goes, if we can do it in a systematic fashion to where we can capture the audio from the question and answer. So if you have a question, go ahead and chime in. And if you hear a colleague speaking, I ask in advance that you be respectful and just not try to overtalk them, but just wait to the next available moment after the question has been answered.
Hi, Keelan. This is Tina Jackson from Collin College.
Hey, Dr. Jackson, how are you?
I'm well. I'm just wondering if we can have our contact individuals, if we send an email to CRI and have our contact for the grant, the contact individuals for the institution change so that we receive any information that's going to be sent out. I know when we sent out our intent to apply, it came from our president's office, and so the challenge is making sure that the people who are actually working on the grant and responsible for submitting actually get anything that you send out, like the DEPS survey that you're going to send out on March 30th.
Okay, I have an idea of the response, but I want to volley this one to Suzanne just to make sure that the protocol is adequately disseminated to everyone. Suzanne, Lifeline? All right. Go ahead. I would say go ahead and email us at the CRI email and indicate what the challenge is, and we'll add you to the list for your institution. Now, if an official change happens, that's the part I'm unsure of, since it's already documented in the RFA, kind of like how the intent to apply worked and then how the communication pattern would be laid out. But I don't think it would be an issue to add you to the email distribution list. And I'm going back. There was a request to get back to this particular slide. Did that answer your question, Dr. Jackson?
It did. Thank you.
All right. Next, any additional questions? And there's a question that was typed in. It says, on the final line of the table, Appendix E, it reads, proposed total grant award. What are the dollar ranges we can enter there? 50 to 75,000, or is it a different range? I believe in the RFA, the actual amount goes up to 100,000. So on the final line in table E, if my understanding, I don't have it directly in front of me, but it is, let me pull it up real quick so I can make sure I give you an accurate response. All right, so in Appendix E, proposed total grant award, the proposed total grant award will be the maximum of 100,000. And in there, something else I'll address with the budget, the cost sharing for applicant, unless waived, the institutions are required to put forth a 10% match. However, understand that that match can be in kind in terms of personnel support to the grant, or it could be if the institution in some cases was kind enough to, we're going to offer additional money for travel, or we're going to offer additional money to cover supplemental instructors specifically for the grant. All of those are acceptable, but unless waived, make sure that you also denote your, make sure you denote your cost sharing for the applicant. And Suzanne, the question that I had was Dr. Jackson from Collin asked the question, can they email the our CRI email, and change the contact that was submitted with the intent to apply? Because for their institution, it was submitted from their president's office, and it creates a issue kind of like with getting that communication down to those who are actually working on the grant.
Yeah, Keelan, can you hear me? Can everybody
Yes.
hear me?
Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, if you want to go ahead and we can't remove anybody who has been, in your RFA, or you've already submitted as your point of contact through the intent, but we can add people. So Tina, if you want to just submit, through the CRI inquiry process, whoever you want to add as another point of contact, you can do that way.
And that was exactly my response.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Wow, seeing that there are none. Again, I have the point of contact up there for you. And again, the inquiry deadline is April 1st. So if you have any questions or comments, be sure to submit them via email to cri@thecb.state.tx.us. And we had a quick question regarding the application deadline, because when we published this, we did not anticipate being in a global pandemic. But do you see yourself not applying because of the deadline, or could potentially a couple of extra weeks to prepare your application benefit you? And you can feel free, you can unmute yourself definitely if you have something to chime in. I see the yeses coming in. Definitely.
Keelan,
Yes.
this is Rebecca Goosen from San Jacinto College.
Hey, Dr. Goosen.
How are you doing? I think a lot of us are not physically in our offices right now. And so as I'm listening to you all talk, I'm thinking of all the people that I will have to get input from to do this. And it's going to be difficult if we're out for a month or so.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to bring that up, that some of us are going to, if you want me to sit down and write it, I'll write it. But then, I could have problems when everybody else comes back to work. So getting that input is, I think, for a lot of us going to be the struggle because, my IR office, I don't have an issue with them, but I've got to get the math people on board, the DE people on board, the ISDs, it's a multiple moving instrument. And right now, nobody's in the office. They're all doing it remotely. So it's a bigger challenge, but I just wanted to bring that up.
And that was part of our rationale for kind of throwing that out there, even with the currently established timeline, being very sensitive to what institutions are experiencing right now. And definitely, we want institutions to submit applications of high quality, and understanding, as I've stated, kind of like in my prose, Suzanne stated in her prose, that our expectation is that the institution is coming together essentially for this response as the way we have it designed. I definitely heed to what you shared. And this definitely helps because I know Suzanne and I have already kind of had the preliminary conversation, but no final decision had been made. But your responses definitely weigh in on helping us with making that decision of what a potential new deadline could be.
This is Suzanne. I just threw out a date, adding another 3 full weeks, May 4th. Is that going to be helpful for everyone? Okay. Okay, great. Okay. I think we've got a majority consensus here. Okay, wonderful.
And
So what we'll
I
go
can
ahead and
definitely start
do,
working on that internally.
yes. So what we'll have to do is go ahead and see today's confirmation via the webinar as an unofficial confirmation that the new application deadline will be May 4th, Monday, May 4th, close. I think it's actually 3 p.m. is when it has to be submitted by. Now we have to follow up with another addendum, just like what we did before. You know, given how we are all teleworking right now, it might take another week or so to get the formal approvals for the addendum. But once that addendum comes through, then of course that would be the official announcement for the extension. But go ahead and rest assured that you can go ahead and see this informal extension announced today during the webinar as something that you can count on. Star Wars Day. Funny.
I know, I saw that. All right. Any additional questions before we conclude the webinar? Seeing that there are none, I do thank you for taking time out of your day to join us, and definitely we wish you the best with everything going on. Stay safe and be on the lookout. In the very soon, you'll receive email communication from us regarding a webinar specifically on COVID-19 and its impact on TSI. So we're definitely going to make ourselves available to address your concerns in advance. I shared this with Suzanne. We'll have some information available to you. We'll have some where we'll take that back to our leadership. And then we'll have some where, unfortunately, the answer in this time is just, I don't know. But be on the lookout for email correspondence from CRI or Suzanne or myself regarding another webinar that we'll host specifically on the Texas Success Initiative assessment and all of those pieces that are tied to it. All right. Say again, thank you. And if you have any questions or concerns after this call, definitely just shoot them via email to cri@thecb.state.tx.us. Thank you all, and you all have a great day.
Thank you.